Hi there, I'm going to take a look at using the pen tool to make a selection around this plane. Uh, this is just a little exercise in using the pen tool maybe to make a little more precise selection as opposed to a pixel-based selection like using the quick selection tool or something like that. I'm kind of going to divide this up into three parts. As I look at it, I have the main body or fuselage of the plane. I'm going to make a selection around that. Then I thought I'd come down and make a selection of the floats down here and the wheels as a separate selection, and then maybe the struts or the structural portion here in between. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to work on this, and I'm going to take my pen tool and I'm going to try to make a selection around this. Now we know the pen tool, if I click I get an anchor point, if I press and drag I get what's called a curve point with direction handles. So to make this easier on me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start back here on the tail because there's a straight line. So I'm going to click and I'm going to just go through the process of making a selection of this plane. I'm probably not going to talk much here, but I'm going to go through this process. And right now most of these are straight edges except there's like this little curve bump here. Let me zoom up on this a little bit so you can see it. What I've done here is I've clicked and I've clicked up here. I'll come over here and I'll press and hold so I can draw kind of a little arc over this because this looks like it's a little bit curved. And then more advanced pen features are, right now this would curve a line out here because the direction handle's here. So I'm just going to come back and click on that, and then I'm going to make that a corner point to come down here. Then I'm going to stretch out a direction handle because this looks like this is curving up a little bit. In fact, I'll undo that. I'll Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and I'll just click here. In fact, I'm going to undo and undo and undo, and I think I'm just going to click here instead of doing a fancy curve, and I'll click up here and here and here. And so I'm just going to proceed on here, just making corner points, it's called. So I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just right now just clicking the mouse on all these straight edges. Now I've got this little curve here. I'm going to press and drag out a little direction handle so I have a slight curve coming down there. I have another curve coming up on the wingtip here. So I am going to drag out a direction handle. This direction handle length, for what it's worth, and it's worth a lot, is I drag this direction handle out 1/3 the distance of this total path. So I'm trying to imagine how long this path is going to be. So I drag out this direction handle that length. I can go back and make adjustments. So I've dragged it out that about that approximate. So I'm going to come over here where just before it starts to curve down, and I'll drag out a direction handle to make that arc come up on that wingtip. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click another one, and I'll press and hold to round off this maybe a little bit. In fact, I didn't even need to do that. Let me undo that because I just really don't need to come back around here. I'm just doing an outline of the plane itself. So I'm just going to come down here, press, and I'll come out here and click and come back and click. I'm going to use my space bar to move my image over here. Now I have this curve here on the windshield, so I'm going to press and drag out a direction handle that's mimicking that, how I want that line or that path to leave here. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to press and hold and pull this out and get that curve as close as I think I need it. body of the plane here selected with the pen tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over on my right side of my screen. I have a little panel over here called Paths. I'm going to click on this, and this is called a work path, and that's what we've just drawn. Now what I want to do is I want to save that work path. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to pick Save Path, and I can't spell fuselage, so I will name this plane body, and so that's saved. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a path around the pontoons down here. So let me zoom up. And I'm going to take my pen tool, and so now I should have a path right now over here called work path, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that path. And I'm going to name this pontoon. Okay. And then I would go in and I would draw these support struts in here. Quick like a bird, I'm going to take let's go ahead. Okay, so we've got these parts. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a second. Now that I've got these different paths done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this plane body path. I'm going to come down at the bottom of my menu, and there's a little panel icon down here that looks like a dashed line. And you can't read my information, so let me move it up a little bit. So if I hover over this, it says load path as selection. So I'm going to click on that, and that loads up the path around the main body of the airplane, we'll say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go under select, and I'm going to save this selection as the name of body. Excuse me. I'm going to click on here. I'm going to deselect, Control D. I'm going to click pontoon. I'm going to load that as a selection. And I'm going to go over to select, and I'm going to save this as a selection. And I'm going to name it pontoon. And now I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to pick front piece, and I'm going to turn it into a selection. And I'm going to save that selection as front piece 1. Hang in here as we convert all these to selections. So front 2, I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to click on front 2. I'm going to load it as a selection. And I'm going to go under select, save selection as front 2. There's a reason why you got to take all these and load them as selections. So I'm going to take this back piece and I'm going to load it, save it as a selection. I'm going to name it back. I'm going to deselect and I'm going to take this cuts back. I'm going to load it here. And it looks like I don't have anything there. So let me take the pen tool and quick like a bird redraw this opening in here, we'll say. And these are going to be used for the cutout inside that actual area. So I'm going to load this as a selection. And looks like it only saved that one. Let's just take it for now and we'll work with that issue when we get to it. Select, save selection, back or cuts back. I'm going to deselect. Alright, here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to come back under my selection menu and I'm going to pick load selection. And what I'm going to pick is body for the plane. It's going to be a new selection. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to go under select and do a little bit different. I'm going to go to load selection, but I want to add to what I already have. So I'm not going to do new, I'm going to do add to selection, and I'm going to pick the next piece, and that's the pontoon. I'm going to click OK. Now I've got the pontoon and the body of the airplane selected. I'm going to go back to selection here, and I'm going to add or load to this selection I already have. I'm going to add to it the front piece, and I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go back to select. I'm going to go to load selection. I'm going to add to this, and I'm going to pick front 2. And I'm going to have it on add, so I'll click OK. So now I've got that portion. So now you can almost guess I'm just going to go back to load selection, add, and I'm going to take the back. And I'm going to click OK. Now it looks like I basically have everything selected here. I have a little concern about this right in here on this back strut, but I think I'm okay. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to use that cuts back selection to chop a hole in here. So I'm going to go load selection, and I'm going to subtract from it by using this cuts back. So that should punch a hole in this rear portion. Okay, so it punched a hole right in here. So we actually subtracted from a selection, so that fixed that. So now I have everything selected more or less, except for a few antennae out here, which I could probably get a hold of. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come over to layers, and on this background, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this padlock so it removes the padlock, so it makes it what's called a real layer. And I'm going to come down, and based upon that selection, I'm going to click on add a mask. So now it has built a mask on all those multiple paths that were converted to selections that were loaded together and added together to make a pretty nice selection here. Now I do have a fly in the ointment here. Looks like I missed a place. So I could, let's see here, I could come up here with my pen tool and click and click and click and click, go back to paths. I could convert that to a selection, go back to layers and make sure I'm on the mask, and now I'm going to fill this selected area with black so it blocks out that background. So I'm going to go edit, fill, black, and because I was on the mask it punches a hole in there, so I'm going to deselect that. Okay, I'm going to try to do this tail light up here and these probably airspeed indicators or whatever back here. So I'm going to zoom up on this. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take my zoom tool and I'm going to zoom up here. Space bar to get my hand tool. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to get a selection of those items. So I'm going to come over on my layers panel. I'm going to put my mouse over the mask and I'm going to shift click. Now that temporarily turns that mask off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's see here, let me take my polygonal lasso here and I'm going to click, 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 and click. And let me zoom up on this a little bit more. And I'm going to hold the shift key down and I'm going to add to this selection. So it looks like it's just a few pixels here. And I'm just going to come up and I'm going to select and make that. I'm going to keep the shift key down. I'm going to click, come up, come over, come down, come over, and back. And I'm still holding the shift key. I'm going to hold the space bar now and move down and get a hold of these two. Click, 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 and complete. And I'm just going back and coming back and ending where I started. Okay, now I'm going to use, I don't even know if I got this part of the plane, so let me get this little piece here. And I'm still holding the shift key down. Okay, I'm going to hold down my space bar. I'm going to go up and get this marker light. So here I'm going to use my space bar, and I moved up, and I'm going to take my elliptical marquee tool here. And I'm going to keep my shift key down. I'm going to put my shift key down before I make this selection so it adds to these other items. So I'm just going to come up here. I'm going to go shift drag around that, and that adds to that selection there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm going to go select, save selection as miscellaneous, we'll call it. I'm going to go up under my, let's think about this for a second. I've got those selected, so I can go over here on my mask and I'm going to click on my mask and that brings it back. And now I still have these little selected areas here. Now what I hope to do is fill those with white so it reveals those antenna and the marker light. So I have white here. I'm going to go up under edit. I'm going to pick fill and I'm on the mask. I'm going to fill with white. So that should bring those antenna back in there a little bit. And I'm going to deselect. And that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and zoom out here. So basically what I did is I just went in there and made a selection and filled those with white, and that revealed those antenna back here. So now if I go ahead and let's say I make a new layer and I'm going to fill that with a color, we'll say. So let's say I come over here and pick kind of a bluish color and I go edit and I go fill and I'm going to fill it with the foreground color. And because the stacking order that layer's on top, I'm just going to pull it down below by plane. And so there is the selection of that plane put on a different background. Put on a different background. I probably could put this plane on any background because at this point I'd probably want to have it on a piece of tarmac or a runway or something where I can have these tires sitting on this so it's flat so it would look natural. But that gives me an idea of maybe using the pen tool to kind of look at a project, divide it up into maybe some parts, and then just concentrate on making a selection of that part, like the body of the plane. And then we did save that work path, and we went in and did a selection of the pontoon, saved that as a work path. Then we took those structural items in the middle and saved those as individual paths, went back, converted them all or load them all as a selection, then save the selections. Then once we had all of our selections saved, we actually went back in the select menu and went through the process of loading them and then adding to each other. So we added every selection together to make a composite of all the selections, which gave us the plane. You know what? It's not easy and it takes some time. But once you get going, it might not be too bad.